Hello and welcome to The Brief. I'm Jafar Hasnan. John Bolton, the former United States National Security Advisor under the Trump administration, published his book titled, quote, "The Room Where It Happened, a White House Memoir," on June 23. In his book, Bolton shared his memoir during his tenure at the White House. The book has drawn serious attention for its withering portrayal of President Trump. He recalled interactions between President Trump and many foreign leaders, alleging Trump of conducting U.S. foreign policy not in the interest of the United States, but for his own benefits. Bolton alleged that Trump had implored Chinese President Xi Jinping for help in winning the re-election, and also detailed alleged improprieties not addressed in Trump's impeachment trial. The book has received widespread criticism, with President Donald Trump calling Bolton a liar and a State Secretary Mike Pompeo calling him a traitor. The White House also said that the book contains classified information and threatens national security. However, the White House's efforts to stop Bolton from publishing the book have not borne fruit, as a U.S. judge denied last week a request by President Trump administrations for an injunction to block the publication of the book. Now, U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth said in his ruling that while Bolton's unilateral conduct raises grave national security concerns, the government has not established that an injunction is an appropriate remedy. So, has Bolton's book endangered national security by providing classified information? How clear are the allegations made by Bolton, and how is it going to affect the upcoming U.S. elections? We will discuss all this and more in this episode of The Brief. But first, in order to set up the discussion for today, let's have a look at this report.
A U.S. judge on Saturday denied a request by the Trump administration for an injunction to block publication of a book by former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Bolton's memoir has drawn wide attention for its withering portrayal of President Donald Trump and how politics drove the president's foreign policy. Bolton describes Trump as imploring Chinese President Xi Jinping for help in winning his 2020 re-election bid, and he detailed alleged improprieties not addressed in Trump's impeachment trial. The administration has sought a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction against the publication of The Room Where It Happened, a White House Memoir, saying it contained classified information and threatened national security. In his ruling, U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth said that, quote, "While Bolton's unilateral conduct raises grave national security concerns, the government has not established that an injunction is an appropriate remedy." Adding, quote, "Defendant Bolton has gambled with the national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potentially criminal liability." But the judge also said it was too late. Quote, "With hundreds of thousands of copies around the globe, many in newsrooms, the damage is done." In a tweet after the decision was released, Trump claimed the ruling was a, quote, "big court win." The president adding, quote, "Bolton broke the law and has been called out and rebuked for so doing, with a really big price to pay. He likes dropping bombs on people and killing them. Now he will have bombs dropped on him."
All right, former National Security Advisor John Bolton's book has taken the U.S. politics by storm. What is going to happen next? How is his book going to impact the outcome of the upcoming U.S. elections? Well, time will tell. Right now, the turmoil in the U.S. politics is exacerbating. On one side, you have the U.S. President Donald Trump, and then on the other side, you have John Bolton. And this book is at the center of discussion. So many allegations, so many foreign leaders criticizing John Bolton. In fact, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called him a traitor. President Donald Trump called him a liar. So why was Bolton even part of the administration if he had so many allegations? Was he fired, or did he quit himself? Let's discuss this further. Joining us now from the United States is Mr. Mark Thomas. He is an adjunct professor at Harvard University. And from the United States. Again, we have Mr. Mark Merowitz from the State University of New York Maritime College. Thank you very much for joining us today, to both of you. Mark, let me start with you. Mark Merowitz, let me start with you. Why is John Bolton coming forward now? What is his motivation behind publishing this book? He was asked by the Democrats to testify. He chose not to do so. What is your navigation through this?
I have a very big navigation. The point is, it has to do with publishing his book. His tenure in the White House was a mismatch with President Trump. In retrospect, it was a bad matchup of a national security advisor with the president. For the reason that, first of all, Bolton did not agree with President Trump's policies. That's the first thing. But the most important thing to keep in mind is that when an advisor comes on board to advise a president, that advisor should be understanding that this is a confidential position and that you don't, with a matter of integrity, speak about every little thing that was discussed. Unless, of course, it's something like Watergate or some serious matter like that. Other than that, many of the things that Bolton talks about, many of them, the fact that he alleges that Trump didn't know that the United Kingdom had nuclear power. The other one that I think was hilarious, that he writes in his book, that President Trump asked him if Finland was part of Russia. Well, you know what? Finland was part of Russia from 1809 to 1917. So I don't know who is the ignorant one here, Bolton or someone else. Bottom line is, he wanted to publish the book. He wanted the $2 million+ that he was going to get for the book. And it's all about that. And so it sets a very bad example for anyone in a confidential position to really violate that. I don't know whether he's a traitor or not, but I think he's definitely not someone, and by the way, someone to trust. But I would say, if every presidential advisor would do what Bolton did, I mean, it just would set everything, on its head, and we wouldn't be able to function properly. You know, President Roosevelt had his Harry Hopkins, and all these presidents have their advisors. And I assure you, they're not all running around to write books. And I think it's really it's very problematic, and it's somewhat disturbing that he did all that.
Indeed, in fact, very disturbing. Professor Thomas, let me come to you. Use of some strong words by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, calling John Bolton a traitor. Is he?
Well, I mean, on a personal level, yes, he was a traitor because he, as my colleague Mark, the other Mark mentioned, I totally agree with what he said. It is common. It's a common understanding when you serve somebody as an advisor, or even if you serve as a committee in any official level, you are not supposed to disclose any details that take place. I mean, this is common standards in America. When you have a position like that and you speak with somebody in the form of an advisor, for example, a lawyer and a client, it is quite understandable that you have this privilege, that it is privileged information. It is not supposed to be told in public. So I'm not sure about the legal aspect of this. I think from a gentlemanly side of it, it is certainly he would be a personal traitor to Donald Trump. On the official level, whether he would be traitor or not, that depends on what he signed. That depends whether he signed a non-disclosure agreement in his security clearance or not. Because I haven't seen that agreement, I cannot say.
Okay. Now, Mr. Merowitz, let me come to you. Do you want to say something else, Dr. Thomas?
Yes, I want to comment on the other point that Mark mentioned, the question of the mismatch between Donald Trump and John Bolton. The big question is, why did Donald Trump hire John Bolton? Why did he bring him in, knowing that he was the architect and the main supporter, the main force that drove the invasion of Iraq? Because Donald Trump was against the invasion of Iraq. He was among the few people who publicly said he was against the invasion of Iraq when it took place. So why did you bring somebody like John Bolton to your administration? So that's the big question. I presume that Donald Trump thought that he could manage him because he is self-confident. He could manage anybody, so he could manage him because John Bolton gives this impression that he is a strong man and he is He is an Americanist and a unilateralist like him. So it's a good thing to bring him. But he miscalculated that John Bolton is a militarist. Donald Trump is not a militarist. He's an Americanist. He is a unilateralist. He wants to make America great again, but he doesn't want to go and invade other countries and change regimes. That was Bolton's program. Bolton wanted South Korea to invade North Korea and change that regime. Bolton wants to invade Iran and change the regime, or actually support the Mujahideen Khalq as a military organization to topple the Iranian theocracy. He wanted I mean, there are other things that he always gave military solutions, and Donald Trump wasn't going to take it.
Okay. Now, I have a key question in my mind, Mr. Merowitz. It's clear that both President Donald Trump and former National Security Advisor John Bolton had many disagreements. Let's assume for a second whatever John Bolton said is true, whatever allegations he made are true, then is he not complicit himself? Silence is tantamount to complicity, isn't it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to pick up on the other Mark's point about the NDA. Yes, in fact, the lawsuit alleges, which I've read the lawsuit and I also just read the judge's order as well, he signed a non-disclosure agreement. What's important about that agreement is the fact that if the government prevails, which Judge Lamberth did say, remember, Judge Lamberth said, you can publish the book. You can't stop the book because the book's already out there. He said the horse is out of the barn, it's out of the country. But Judge Lambert thinks the government will prevail on the lawsuit. And what does the lawsuit say? It says that any royalties or money that Bolton earns from this book must be disgorged and given back to the government. Judge Lambert thinks that Trump is going to win that lawsuit. So at the end of the day, what happens to Bolton? Well, he may have violated classified information, okay, and he may have also have to give back his royalties. Where I think is and I think this is your earlier question about Ukraine, and that's really kind of the key point here, and that is when the House wanted to call Bolton as a witness, Bolton said, I won't testify in the impeachment inquiry unless a court gives me an order to do so, okay? And then when the Senate considered Trump's impeachment after the House impeached Trump, Bolton said, oh, I want to testify. And the Senate said, no, it was controlled by the Republicans. I found it very telling that I was watching an interview with the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler, and they're asking him, you want Bolton to come and testify now? And the answer was, I think I'll think about it. I mean, really think about the strategy of Bolton on that type of thing. If he really had something to say, then he should have been a whistleblower like the whistleblower. He should have come forward and said what he wanted to say, not hide behind, which is executive privilege. Now, here's the point about the privilege. I think the president has the privilege, not Bolton. Bolton's issue is one of, as Mark pointed out, is one of integrity and loyalty. And not necessarily, I don't know necessarily, I don't see where he's a, quote, traitor, unquote. That part I don't necessarily see, but I think this loyalty in an advisor, in a confidential advisor, is something that is a troubling legacy to show to others who may want to go into government service. Now, on the mismatch on North Korea, look, on North Korea, Bolton was aghast, upset with Trump's approach to North Korea for many of the reasons that Mark pointed out. But among others, he didn't like the whole love diplomacy where, Trump said we love each other, we're writing love letters, and shook hands with him. And he feels, Bolton, in the book, that Trump was played like a fiddle by Kim Jong-un. But the truth of the matter is that Trump's the only president, I think, who's actually had a chance to go and talk to a North Korean leader and to, I mean, it is ridiculous on the part of Bolton to enter the administration as if he would be so shocked and so surprised at what President Trump might say about various policies. I mean, this is President Trump who said that my button is bigger than your button. That's his diplomacy. This is how he operates. He's a real estate guy, okay? He even told Kim Jong-un, I believe, that, hey, listen, don't buy missiles, build hotels. I mean, people laughed at that. That's Trump's diplomacy. If Bolton is a quite intelligent, brilliant expert on foreign policy, if he didn't know that, then he was living in a complete, a fantasy world of not knowing what President Trump is all about. And maybe Bolton thought, well, I can come and maybe come along. Maybe it was a mismatch into adding on to Mark's point. Maybe Trump thought he could dominate Bolton, and maybe Bolton thought, you know what? I'm so smart, I can come in there, and President Trump's going to listen to me because I'm very smart. Last point. Why pick Bolton? And that was your question. And I think the reason is that Bolton has a lot of credibility among the Republican base, the Trump base. He is a hardliner, he is a hawk, and he has a lot of credibility on this whole approach that he has. But it is correct that it ended up being a mismatch because as much as Bolton thought he could manage Trump, as much as Trump thought he could manage Bolton, they couldn't manage each other and ended up becoming two conflicting parties on very important issues, and that was the end game. And then Trump fired Bolton, and then Bolton wrote a book and got money out of it, so was trying to get money out of it. So I think at the end of the day, it's an extremely sad story, maybe not of a traitor, but of somebody that comes in to take a confidential position and then ends up wanting to profit from it. That's not why you go into government service. That's how I see it.
Okay, now, Dr. Thomas, it does seem like a publicity stunt, but on the other hand, like Mr. Merowitz mentioned, John Bolton is considered someone really credible among President Donald Trump's base. But I was listening to one of his interviews. He said that he still considers himself a Republican, but he is doing everything in favor of the Democrats right now. So how is this going to work out?
Yes, I think he went in it for himself. I think the fact that he knows that if Donald Trump doesn't win this election, the alternative is a Democrat. So when he is arguing that Donald Trump is not fit to be president at this time, then he is basically helping the Democrats to win the elections. So and that shows you that he doesn't care about the Republican Party. So what he did was actually he was stabbing the Republican Party in the back. Maybe he should have waited a few months until after the elections, and then he could have published his book. But,
Dr. Thomas, if I may ask you here, are you saying that if John Bolton changes his party, we should not be surprised? He can.
I don't think he will change his party, no. I think that would be too... I mean, he will discredit himself so much, because if you look at his history, he is coming from a really very... I wouldn't call it conservative. He's calling himself conservative, but I wouldn't call him a conservative. Conservative people are some people who want to preserve the current status quo. They want to preserve their values, their culture. He is an interventionist, militarist interventionist. He's more of a, you could say, like a right-wing, maybe even far right-wing person. So I really doubt that he will further discredit himself and announce himself as a Democrat. I mean, it is a good thing that he was fired by Donald Trump because he was behind Donald Trump withdrawing from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. The reason why he withdrew, not because of Russia, he withdrew because China was not signatory on that treaty, and he wanted the United States to go into the South China Sea and militarily confront China. So can you imagine what kind of instability that would have brought to the world? And the U.S. is out of that treaty now. So he had succeeded in taking the U.S. out of that treaty, but his plan was even further to undertake or to take the course of violent action in order to stop the Chinese government of pursuing its interests in the South China Sea.
Okay, now, Mr. Merowitz, an interesting question here. Was John Bolton fired or did he quit? Our audience might be wondering right now.
This happens repeatedly in the Trump administration. We just recently had that with the United States Attorney here in the Southern District. He was asked to resign, then he resigned. He said, I'm not asked to resign. So there's a disconnect on that. I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't really make a difference because Bolton becomes sort of like, and to pick up on the last point, he's sort of like a never-Trumper. He's a Republican, but he's now divorced himself from supporting the president. And that could be very problematic for him, as is indicated by Mark. Of course, if Biden wins the election, then that's one thing. I don't know, maybe he wants a job with Biden. It could be. You never know. Because he did say President Trump is not fit to be the president. That's a pretty powerful point that could be seen as a political wedge to make people kind of distance themselves from Trump. And Bolton is a person of knowledge and credibility, at least on the outside. I think on the... I don't know what his political persuasion is. I think he's it's really irrelevant at this point. The damage is done, and he said what he said, and the government is going to pursue his royalties, and they're going to get his royalties, and and he'll be very well known, and he'll be famous, and will have made his mark in history. I think the one other area that's important to think about is Iran, and on Iran, I believe that Bolton and Trump were actually matched up in terms of withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal. On that one, there was, I think, simpatico or harmony, or in terms of their points of view. The points about the South China Sea, North Korea, as we plumb this, as we dive into this, we see that the approaches that these two personalities are coming from, and President Trump is the president, seems to be really sort of completely at odds with one another. In terms of the intermediate treaty, that related to Russia, and Trump's argument there was that Russia was not abiding by the treaty. And that was another issue where Bolton took issue with President Trump and how he dealt with Russia. And that has been a perplexing issue for many analysts and for people in America wondering what is the relationship with the Russians. And it's kind of a hard one to figure out. And it seems to be a close relationship with Putin, but at the same time, the United States places sanctions. It's utterly impossible to understand that policy. Now, maybe somebody like Bolton comes in there, and maybe he just sits there and is absolutely upset by the fact that he can't get credibility or credence on what this administration is doing. And guess what? It's very hard for anybody to understand what the foreign policy of President Trump is at any particular time. On China, we see now heightening tensions with China. The point you made, Mark, about the South China Sea, that's a hotbed issue where we're at this time. Look, President Trump has gone through, I think there were 3 national security advisors at least at this point. He had mismatches with his advisors. That's very problematic. But you know what? I would say, just to look back a little bit, many presidents have had issues with national security advisors, and also the competition between the national security advisor and the Secretary of State. Can you imagine Secretary of State Pompeo is calling Bolton a traitor? I mean, that is really over the top. I think it's really over the top. Truth of the matter is, when he submitted his book for review to the White House, the reviewer did clear the book, okay? Then a higher official came in and said, you know what, I think there's some classified material. But they never gave him a letter to clear him to let him put out the book. So the way I gather that, and I don't have all the details, obviously, of what that's about, is that for the most part, the book was cleansed of classified material. And many of the things that have been discussed are criticisms by Bolton of Trump's inadequacy in foreign policy. They are not divulged. I haven't heard, honestly, I don't know if you have. Have you heard one thing that has been discussed that in fact sounded or had the element of being a classified piece of information? There isn't. The only one that could have been related to Ukraine and the conversations on Ukraine, and on that one, the advisors to President Trump say it's not true. So what would have been the benefit for him to come to testify anyway at the end of the day? He would have said what he said. The House would have impeached Trump. The Senate would have said, you're acquitted. So, in other words, there's nothing. I have seen no smoking gun, no some amazing statement, classified, like WikiLeaks. I mean, that one was replete with classified cables and information that was truly, truly communications between ambassadors and the State Department. I haven't read the book, okay, so I confess that. But I mean, the reviewer in the White House cleared the book for the most part. So it's unlikely that there's anything much there, and I didn't hear anything. Maybe you or Mark or Jafar, did you hear anything? So what's really going on here is the fact that presidential advisor makes a tell-all book, gets a big advance, and the government doesn't like it, not so much because he uses classified information, because if he does, Judge Lambert says that could be a problem, that's a criminal offense, but because the whole idea of coming out and
I would say, though, I'm not
Trump.
sure if classified information was compromised or not, but U.S. foreign policy was compromised. There are some allegations which could hurt the U.S. foreign policy in the long term, aren't there?
I don't know. I don't know what could hurt. I mean, the fact that Trump had a love affair with Kim Jong-un, I don't know. That people are of different opinions. The fact that we pulled out the Iran nuclear deal, okay, I don't know what. I happen to personally think that was a good idea. Maybe people would disagree with that. The fact that Trump, he claims, doesn't understand foreign policy. Is that going to knock you over your chair and be surprised that maybe a president doesn't know every little detail of foreign policy? And I go back to the one with Finland, and I'm still puzzling on that one, because I actually went and looked at that, and Finlandization was something that the Russians kept Finland under their thumb. But more than that, Finland was part of Russia. So what's the whole point? And they keep bringing these points up. I don't believe that he compromised anything other than giving his opinion, which is the bottom line, that President Trump, he says, is not fit to be president. And that could be seen as compromising the ability of the president to function in his position. But that would be a political criticism. I don't see that as compromising a strategy. I didn't hear anything. Maybe there's something out there, but not so far.
Okay.
Yeah, Jafar,
sure,
can I add
Go
something?
ahead.
Yes, I totally agree with what Mark said. Basically, you have to look at this book this way. This is a personal rivalry between him and Donald Trump, and he wants to get back at him for being fired. He is. It's an act of revenge. It is attacking Donald Trump's character. The problem, however, is that there isn't much to attack anymore in terms of Donald Trump's character. We know, I mean, he has provided material for even comedy shows. I mean, his behavior is so flamboyant, unpredictable, and let's say it arouses people's interest in terms of providing amusing material for all of the networks to cover. So we know that. We already know that he says things. He says things that are off. He says things that make us laugh while he is actually serious about it. So people up to now have not taken all of that seriously. They know that this president has shortcomings, but generally they believe that he is a deal maker. So I think what John Bolton succeeded in doing, he actually succeeded in proving that Donald Trump wants to make deals as opposed to going to war. Donald Trump does not want to have bloodshed on his hand. I mean, he may approve killing this or that in terms of assassination, but he doesn't want to have a major war on his schedule. So so in that sense, I think Bolton has reinforced the view that Donald Trump is a deal maker. It's just that the other parties are not meeting him halfway. That includes Iran, that includes North Korea, and maybe China too.
Okay, now, Dr. Thomas, another question here, key question. Mr. Merowitz raised it. Is there a possibility for John Bolton to work with Joe Biden? I mean, Bolton is inclined towards the far right. So is that something that we could see post-U.S. presidential elections?
Yes. I think that is unlikely, because I think that will damage Joe Biden. I think because he has so much baggage, John Bolton comes with so much anti-democratic policy, anti-democratic vision baggage that I think it would be impossible to repaint him as somebody who will be willing to advance a democratic agenda. I mean, look at his history as a civil servant. He has always been an assistant to somebody, but he has always been hawkish, and he was always inspired people to commit violence, inspired the United States, advocated the United States to go first, try the violent option, and then try other things. So I really don't think it is a fit. I think it would not serve Biden well if he does accept him or he asks him to join his administration.
Okay, now let's move forward with the discussion, Mr. Merowitz. Let's talk about U.S. internal politics. How is this book going to impact the outcome of the upcoming U.S. elections?
I don't believe it will have much of an impact. I'll tell you why I think so. First of all, with COVID-19 and with the George Floyd murder and so forth, Americans are really focused on police reform. They're focused on COVID-19, and they're really not focused on foreign policy to the extent that that's going to be a big indicator. I mean, here, Bolton shoots a salvo across Trump. You know, he's not fit and he doesn't know anything and he says ridiculous things, which Mark pointed out. He does say these things, and we're used to it. It's not such a surprise that, you know, that he would say something or not know something. That just comes with the baggage. And by the way, I think the president's base recognizes it and likes it. I mean, that's exactly how President Donald Trump was elected in 2016. He said all sorts of things, many of which people on the left are reprehensible. They still think so. They impeached, the House Democrats impeached President Trump. Doesn't that tell you something about the polarization of this country, that 3 presidents have been impeached in the history of this country: Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump? Every history book, every political science book has to be revised now to put Trump in there. It didn't mean anything in the sense that the Senate acquitted him. But at the end of the day, people are focused on those issues. Again, I bring up the point about Jerry Nadler, who they asked him, oh, is this a big deal? And he said, well, I'll think about it. I'll think if I want to call him. Boy, if this would be a big deal, they would call him. But no, we're already beyond that. We're in the election campaign. The questions in the election campaign are, how did the president handle COVID? How is the economy doing? Is the economy going to be back in place, or is it going to fall apart? And it's not going to be about the issues of foreign policy. Now, certainly, if there's a eruption or some terrible thing that happens in Hong Kong or Taiwan or somewhere in the world which would be a precipitant to conflict. We had the border clash in the Galwan Valley between China and India. That's very worrisome. One might say that this occurs in a limbo situation because of COVID. We're all home and there's a lot of confusion. But the focus in America now is really on domestic issues, police reform, on trying to get the society back in place, because it's really broken into a lot of pieces. And we need to put it back together like Humpty Dumpty. Maybe we can actually put it together. And we're not thinking about all these policies. Now, of course, these threats are out there. And as Mark pointed out, you know, President Trump did assassinated a number of Baghdadi and the Iranian, his mastermind of terrorism and so forth. He did all those things, but we haven't seen any conflagrations. And it's President Trump and the Trump doctrine that states that we do not have any more endless wars, no more endless wars. We see what he did in Syria. In Syria, the United States moved some troops around, moved them out, moved them in, and that one, basically, the United States is still in there, but in a token fashion. Similarly, in Afghanistan, there is no ratcheting up of these issues, the Trump doctrine. Now, questionable for another discussion whether the Trump doctrine is a good idea or whether or not after COVID-19 the world is going to be in a better place or not. But I don't think I'm going to say average Americans. I don't mean to be, condescending. But the elites are all abuzz in a Twitter about Trump and COVID-19, and we're all participating in discussions and scholarly discussions about the foreign policy. And that's very important, to world stability. But the average Americans are not focusing on it. They're worrying about, are they going to get their unemployment check? Are they going to get their CARES Act? Are they going to get their small business grants? That's what they're caring about. And they also want to be sure that there's stability in the streets and stability in the country, and that we fix a lot of the problems that we have here. That's what they're thinking about. So end of the day, John Bolton is another advisor, wrote a book, and went out there, went on the news. We're talking about him. They're selling books. They're watching the interviews. And that's about it. And pretty soon, something else will happen. We're going to move on. And, you know, John Bolton will be a memory. And maybe if he keeps the money, he'll actually be a very wealthy guy.
Well, yeah, it does seem like it. Now, Dr. Thomas, same question. How do you think this book is going to impact the outcome of the upcoming U.S. elections? And also, after all this drama, do you think Republicans are going to distance themselves from Bolton?
Yes. To start with, I totally agree with what Mark said. To start with, the reaction, what are the voters thinking about? The voters are afraid of another lockdown. I am here and I speak with people on the working level. They are afraid that there will be another lockdown, because in some of the states there has been some surge in infections. They are afraid that those who have managed to get their jobs back are going to lose it again. So how Donald Trump and all of the governors, how they react to this surge in the infections, that is going to affect the economy, and that's going to affect people's reaction to Donald Trump. So I think that is a question mark. How that is going to work out, that's a question mark. My feeling is that President Trump does not want to have another lockdown, that there's going to be a more reasonable, less severe way of managing the spread of the virus, maybe advocating people who are high risk to quarantine instead of quarantining the healthy population and the low risk population. So it really depends how the government handles the economy, the fallout of the economy from the virus. The other part of the question was what is the perception of the Republicans regarding John Bolton? I think he had lost all credibility. I think the Republicans, simply because if he attacks Donald Trump, then not only Donald Trump will lose the elections, but the Republicans will be losing the elections. So I think, as far as Republicans are concerned, John Bolton is not a popular person among Republicans at this time. I think the only one who probably would like him would be his mother.
Okay, now let me add one more question here. Do you think there are more John Boltons within the Republican Party?
Yes, I mean, to a certain extent, Mike Pompeo is coming from the same, let me say, the same ideology. I don't know how, probably Mike Pompeo is more personally careful how he handles his relationship with Donald Trump. But if you look at Mike Pompeo's history, and his positions are not that far away from John Bolton, although, again, they are less aggressive, less militaristic. But I would think that let's say, neoconservative ideology is present in the Trump administration with Mike Pompeo.
All right.
I'd like to add something. Can I add just a quick point on that? Pompeo is potentially a major political figure in the Republican Party. He's someone who could run for president, who could run for higher office. Bolton is not in that situation. And as far as the base is concerned, I think the base supports Trump. I think there are many out there. There are certainly Republicans who are disillusioned about Trump, but I think basically his supporters support him. And honestly, he tells them to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. He tells them to come to the rally, don't come to the rally. He wants to open up the society. He talks about whatever he basically says. His supporters support him. That's the percentage of his support. The question is, as with 2016, can he pick up the additional support? And by the way, I want to say that, his base liked the idea that he took out Qasem Soleimani. They like the idea that he took out al-Baghdadi. They like the idea of the shows of force, as long as it doesn't precipitate what Mark referred to as these kinds of years of militarization of endless wars. That's the Trump doctrine. I'm not giving you endless wars, but I'm going to get what he says, the bad guys. It sounds like something my grandson talks about. But the point of the matter is that the base, I think, is satisfied with him. They're even satisfied with his handling of COVID-19, which is quite extraordinary. One would not think so if one were a political analyst to think, how does this work? But that's how it works. You can see from the rallies that, and you can see from the reaction that he still has a lot of support. So it's kind of, Bolton came along, he put his point across, he did the damage he did, and he will be, he's a major foreign policy expert, a major foreign policy figure, he always will be, but, it was a square peg in a round hole. It didn't work out well, and it may have been Bolton's hubris, his hubris about his knowledge, and that is kind of a flaw that I think a number of advisors have fallen by the wayside, because they came in thinking that they knew more than the president, but he's the president. And he also describes the atmosphere in the White House of how the White House is run, and it's run in the fashion of the Trump organization. And if you don't like it and you can't handle it, then you shouldn't go in there and try to do that. And he tried to do it, and he can't move a mountain, and he didn't succeed, and basically Trump fired him, or he resigned, irrelevant. He's gone, and what does he do? Well, as Mark pointed out, he wants to make make a dollar on this, and also get back his view and his point on it, so that Trump didn't have the last laugh against him.
Okay, now we're running out of time, but I do have to ask you this million-dollar question to both of you. Who is winning the upcoming U.S. presidential elections? Dr. Thomas.
Yes, I think it is like it used to be in 2016. It is very hard to trust the polls that you are seeing. I mean, the polls are saying that Joe Biden is leading, but if we recall what was happening in 2016, many people were not revealing their preference for Trump because he is a controversial character. In some ways, on a personal level, it is embarrassing. Some people who consider themselves, let's say, careful people, they don't feel comfortable in public to say that they are supporting Donald Trump. They actually, a lot of people who voted for him didn't declare that they voted for him. They were very quiet about it. Right. And I am afraid that the polls now are in the same situation. So, while they are showing that Joe Biden has the lead, I suspect that this is not reliable. So I don't know. At this time, I wouldn't be able to call the shots to say this is the one or that's the one who's going to win.
Okay.
I'd like to add another wrinkle to this, and that is the question of, if COVID-19 continues, what kind of an election are we going to have? Are we going to have mail-in elections? We're going to have internet elections? I mean, this is a big problem. People are starting to think about this. For example, in Pennsylvania, they do not count absentee ballots until 9 o'clock at night on Election Day. So we're going to have a lot of chaos. Are people going to want to go out in COVID-19 and stand on lines, as the case in Georgia, and possibly catch COVID because they want to go and vote? Trump wants a good turnout of his people, and his people will turn out. But will he get enough turnout? How the election will be conducted and the methodology for the election, and whether it's going to be a mail election and whether there are going to be problems with the election, is going to be a very, very significant factor in determining the outcome. In 2016 was completely unique in terms of, as Mark described, nobody expected it, and the whole thing that occurred was quite extraordinary. This one is going to be even more extraordinary, because how are we going to, every state has a different procedure. Are we going to use the internet, mail? This is going to be one mess. And then after that, some have surmised that there will be court challenges, and then you can have a challenge to the electoral vote. That challenge can take place in the courts, and it can take place even in the Congress when the Congress counts the electoral votes in January. The possibilities of of a disruption of this election are endless and very worrisome. And it would be necessary for everybody to start thinking about how are we going to conduct a national election. We had enough problems conducting primaries and elections on Election Day, for example, in New York, although the Wall Street Journal just reported that those elections tended to work out pretty well. But we know we saw what happened in Georgia, and that was a mess, an absolute mess, people standing on line for hours. So I'm quite concerned about that. So that's an uncertainty. Now, at the end of the day, generally with the presidential elections, we turn on the TV and we see they call this state, they call that state, this the electoral vote, this one won, this didn't. With Hillary and Trump, it was a little bit different, but usually we do that. How are we going to do that? We won't be able to. There'll be millions of absentee ballots that will have to be counted, and how are we going to do it? So I would put that forward as my big concern for this election, so I'm not going to call it because there's no way to call it at all. Impossible.
And it would be interesting to see how this turns out. Thank you very much, Mr. Mark Merowitz and Mr. Mark Thomas. I'm really happy to see you both safe and sound. Please stay like this. Please stay safe. Thank you very much once again for talking to us on A News.
Thank you, Jafar.
Thank you.
All right, and this brings us to the end of another episode of The Brief. Stay tuned on A News. I'll be back with you with another exciting episode